The notification on my phone came at 2:17 in the afternoon. It was from the security system I'd installed at my cabin in the Adirondacks 6 months ago. Motion detected. Someone was inside. I was supposed to be the only one with a key. I sat in my home office in Westchester, staring at the alert. The cabin was 3 hours north, tucked into 40 acres of pine forest that my late wife Margaret and I had purchased back in 1983. We'd built it ourselves that summer, just the two of us and a contractor named Bill who taught us which end of a hammer to hold. Margaret passed 4 years ago, but I kept the place exactly as she'd left it. Our grandson Eric knew he was welcome any time. He had the only other key, but Eric was in Boston. He'd texted me that morning about a client presentation. His wife Vanessa was supposedly at a yoga retreat in Vermont. At least, that's what she'd told the family. I pulled up the security camera feed on my laptop. The image took a moment to load. When it did, I felt my chest tighten. Vanessa was there. But she wasn't alone. She was with a man I'd never seen before. They were sitting close together on the leather couch that Margaret had picked out from a furniture maker in Lake Placid. Very close. His hand was on her knee. She was laughing at something he'd said, her head thrown back, that practiced influencer laugh she did for her videos. But this wasn't being filmed. This was private. I sat back in my chair and closed the laptop. I'm 72 years old. I spent 38 years as a criminal defense attorney before I retired. I've seen enough of human nature to know what I was looking at, and I've learned something important over all those years in courtrooms. The first move you make determines everything that follows. I didn't call Eric. Not yet. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee, sat back down, and started to think. Eric had met Vanessa 2 years ago at some tech conference in Austin. She was 26, building her social media presence, calling herself a lifestyle influencer. She had maybe 30,000 followers back then, posting about sustainable fashion and meditation routines. Eric was 31, working as a software engineer for a financial services company. He was brilliant with code, hopeless with people. He'd always been shy, a little awkward, the kind of kid who spent his high school years building computers instead of going to parties. When he brought Vanessa to meet the family, I'd watched her carefully. I saw how she positioned herself for photos, how she checked her phone constantly, how she talked about her brand and her content strategy. But I also saw how Eric looked at her, like she'd hung every star in the sky. And I remembered Margaret's voice in my head. Let him make his own mistakes. That's how people learn. So I kept my concerns to myself. They married 8 months later. Small ceremony, very Instagrammable. Vanessa live-streamed parts of it to her followers, who had grown to 75,000 by then. Eric seemed happy. That was enough for me. But over the past year, I'd noticed things. Vanessa's follower count had exploded to over 400,000. She'd quit her part-time job at a marketing agency. Her content had changed, gotten more provocative, more focused on controversy and reaction. She'd started doing videos where she'd prank Eric, filming his confused reactions and posting them with captions about clueless husbands. Eric laughed along, but I saw something in his eyes that worried me. Then there were the money issues. Eric had mentioned in passing that their credit card bills had gotten out of control. Vanessa needed better equipment, better lighting, a professional photographer. She'd hired a manager who took 20%. The engagement was there, she insisted. They just needed to invest more to capitalize on it. I'd offered to sit down and talk with them about budgeting. Vanessa had smiled and said they had it under control. 3 weeks ago, Eric called me at midnight. He'd had too much to drink, which wasn't like him. He said he felt like he didn't know Vanessa anymore, like he was living with someone who was always performing, always on, never just present. He said he'd found messages on her phone from someone named Blake. When he'd asked about it, she'd gotten angry, accused him of being controlling and insecure. Then she'd turned it into content, posting a video about toxic masculinity and the importance of maintaining independence in marriage. Her followers loved it. Eric apologized to me for calling, said he was probably overreacting, and hung up. I looked at Margaret's photo on my desk. What would you do? I asked her. I knew what she'd say. She'd say to wait, to watch, to gather information before acting. Margaret had been a paralegal. She understood the importance of evidence. So that's what I did. I reopened my laptop and went back through the security footage. The system kept recordings for 30 days. I started going backward, day by day. This wasn't the first time they'd been there. 4 days ago, same time of day, they'd arrived together. Different car, a red Tesla. They'd stayed for 3 hours. The cameras inside the cabin showed them drinking wine, laughing, eventually moving to the bedroom. I didn't watch past the moment they closed that door. I didn't need to. I went back further. 2 weeks ago. Same pattern. Same man. Same red Tesla. 3 weeks ago. Again. I made notes. Dates, times, license plate numbers that I could see in the driveway footage. The man was in his early 30s. Well-dressed. Confident in the way people are when they've never really struggled. In one clip, I could see him on his phone, and I managed to get a partial screenshot of his screen. It looked like he was checking stock prices. I have a friend named Robert Chen, who retired from the FBI's cybercrimes division. We'd worked together on a case about 15 years ago, stayed in touch. I sent him the license plate number and the screenshot. He called me back 2 hours later. Blake Morrison, he told me. 34 years old. Hedge fund analyst. Lives in Manhattan, Upper East Side. Makes about $700,000 a year. Recently divorced. And here's the interesting part. His ex-wife accused him of having multiple affairs during their marriage. Her lawyers had documented at least 4 separate relationships. I thanked Robert and hung up. The coffee had gone cold. I made another cup. Eric deserved to know. But I knew my grandson. If I just told him what I'd seen, he'd confront Vanessa immediately. She'd cry, or she'd get angry, or she'd spin some story. She'd post about it online, paint herself as the victim of false accusations and a controlling family. Her followers would rally around her. And Eric, who still loved her despite everything, might believe her, might give her another chance. I'd seen it happen 100 times in my career. People want to believe the best of those they love. They'll accept explanations that don't quite add up. They'll overlook evidence that's right in front of them. I needed to be smarter than that. I pulled up Vanessa's social media profiles. 412,000 followers now. Her recent posts were performing well. Lots of engagement. Her bio said she was focused on authentic living and female empowerment. Her brand deals included a sustainable clothing company, a meditation app, and a meal kit service. I clicked through her recent videos. There was one from yesterday. She was at what looked like a yoga studio, talking about the importance of taking time for self-care. The comments were full of people praising her wisdom and asking about her retreat experience. Except she wasn't at a retreat. She was at my cabin with Blake Morrison. I started screenshotting everything. Her posts claiming to be at the retreat. The dates and times. I cross-referenced them with my security footage. Every time she'd claimed to be at yoga or meditation sessions, the cameras showed her at the cabin with Blake. This wasn't just infidelity. This was fraud. She was lying to her sponsors, lying to her followers, lying to maintain a brand that was built on authenticity. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. In one of her recent videos, filmed about a week ago, she'd done a tour of a beautiful cabin in the woods. She called it her personal retreat space. She talked about owning it as an investment in her mental health. She never mentioned it was my cabin. She never mentioned Margaret or the years we'd spent there. She'd made it part of her brand. The video had 300,000 views. The comments were full of people saying they were inspired by her commitment to wellness. One of her sponsors had commented asking if they could film a campaign there. She was monetizing my wife's memory. I closed the laptop and sat very still. Margaret and I had built that cabin with our own hands. We'd spent our anniversaries there. We'd brought Eric there as a child and taught him to fish in the lake, to identify birds, to appreciate silence. After Margaret died, I'd considered selling it, but Eric had asked me not to. He said some of his best memories were in that place. And Vanessa had turned it into content. I picked up my phone and made a call. The number belonged to David Brennan, a partner at one of the largest law firms in New York. We'd worked opposite sides of a major case back in 2007. He'd beaten me fair and square, but we'd respected each other's work. We'd stayed friendly. "David," I said when he answered, "I need your help with something sensitive." He listened while I explained the situation. When I finished, there was a long pause. "That's complicated," he said finally. "What are you thinking?" "I want to protect Eric," I said. "And I want to make sure she can't do this to anyone else." There was another pause. I could hear him thinking. "Send me everything you have," he said. "Photos, videos, documentation of her posts, license plate, the name of the other man, everything. Give me 48 hours. I sent the files before we hung up. Then I called Robert Chen again. "I need one more favor," I told him. "I need to know everything about Blake Morrison's financial situation. And I need to know if he's aware that Vanessa is married." Robert was quiet for a moment. "You're building a case, aren't you?" "I'm protecting my family," I said. He called me back at 8 that evening. Blake Morrison had no idea Vanessa was married. She'd told him she was divorced, that her ex was abusive, that she'd had to rebuild her entire life. She'd been seeing him for about 6 months. He'd mentioned her to his friends, said he was thinking about getting serious with her. Robert had found text messages pulled from Morrison's cloud backup during a securities investigation that Morrison's firm was peripherally involved in. In the messages, Vanessa had asked Morrison for money several times. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there, then larger sums, 5,000 to cover an emergency dental procedure that insurance wouldn't cover. 8,000 when her car supposedly broke down. Morrison had sent the money every time. There was no dental procedure. There was no broken car. Eric had mentioned she'd been shopping a lot lately. New camera equipment, designer clothes for her videos. She'd been scamming Morrison the same way she was scamming her sponsors and her followers. I sat with that information for a long time. At 10 p.m., David Brennan sent me an email. "I've reviewed everything you sent. We have multiple causes of action here. First, she's committed fraud against her sponsors by misrepresenting her location and activities while filming sponsored content. That's a breach of contract with potential criminal implications. Second, she's potentially violated your property rights by filming commercial content at your cabin without permission. Third, there's the issue of adultery and the financial impact on your grandson's marital assets. And fourth, if Morrison was unaware of her marital status, she may have committed fraud against him as well." The email continued. "I've reached out to 3 of her major sponsors through back channels, showed them the evidence of her location fraud. They're very interested in discussing termination of her contracts and potential legal action. I've also been in touch with the platform where she posts most of her content. They take fraud very seriously, especially when it impacts advertiser relationships." He concluded, "You have enough here to end her influencer career. The question is what you want the outcome to be." I stared at that email for a long time. What did I want? I wanted Eric to be free of her. I wanted him to see who she really was. But more than that, I wanted to make sure she couldn't do this again. Couldn't lie and manipulate and monetize other people's lives for her own gain. The next morning, I drove up to the cabin. I timed it perfectly. The security system showed me when they arrived. 1:47 p.m., the red Tesla pulled into the driveway. They went inside, laughing, carrying wine and grocery bags. I gave them an hour. Let them get comfortable. Let them think they were safe. At 2:50 p.m., I pulled my truck into the driveway behind the Tesla, blocking it in. I walked up to the front door and let myself in with my key. They were in the living room. Vanessa was in yoga pants and a tank top, bare feet tucked under her on the couch. Blake Morrison was next to her, arm around her shoulders. There were wine glasses on the coffee table, half full. They both froze when they saw me. Vanessa's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, fear. Then, remarkably, she tried for indignant. "What are you doing here?" she said, standing up quickly. "You can't just barge in like this." "I can, actually," I said calmly. "It's my cabin." Blake Morrison was slower to react. He looked between us, confused. "Your cabin?" he said to me. Then to Vanessa. "I thought you said this was yours?" Vanessa's mouth opened and closed. I could see her trying to calculate, trying to figure out which lie to tell. I pulled out my phone and held it up so they could both see the screen. It showed one of her recent videos, the one where she'd toured the cabin and called it her retreat space. "You told your followers this belonged to you," I said. "You filmed sponsored content here without my permission. You lied about your location to your sponsors while you were here with him." I pointed at Morrison. "And you told him you were divorced." Morrison's face had gone pale. "Divorced?" he said, looking at Vanessa. "You're married?" Vanessa tried to touch his arm. "Blake, I can explain." He pulled away from her. "You're married," he repeated. It wasn't a question anymore. She turned to me. Her eyes were filling with tears. "Please," she said. "You don't understand. Eric and I were having problems. I was going to tell him. I just needed time." "Time," I repeated. "Like the 6 months you've been lying to everyone?" I held up my phone again. This time it showed the security footage, date stamped. All the time she'd been here with Morrison while telling Eric she was somewhere else. "I've sent all of this to your sponsors," I said. "And to the platform. They're very interested in your pattern of fraud." The tears stopped immediately. Her expression changed. Became harder. "You can't do that," she said. "That's my career. That's my income." "It was built on lies," I said. "You monetized my wife's memory. You used my property without permission. You committed fraud against your sponsors and your followers." Blake Morrison had stood up. He was backing toward the door. "I should go," he muttered. "You should," I agreed. "But first, you should know she's been asking you for money under false pretenses. There was no dental emergency, no broken car. She used that money to fund her lifestyle while her husband covered their actual bills." His face went from pale to red. "You," he said to Vanessa, "are unbelievable." He left. We heard the Tesla start up. I moved my truck so we could leave. When I came back inside, Vanessa was sitting on the couch, her phone in her hands. She was typing frantically. "Texting Eric?" I asked. "Planning your story?" She looked up at me. "What do you want?" she said quietly. "I want you to tell Eric the truth," I said. "All of it. I want you to shut down your influencer accounts. And I want you out of my family's life." She laughed. It was a bitter sound. "You can't make me do any of that." "You're right," I said. "I can't. But your sponsors can terminate your contracts. The platform can remove your accounts for fraud. Blake Morrison can file a complaint about financial fraud. And Eric can file for divorce with documentation of adultery and financial deception. All of that's already in motion." Her hands were shaking now. "You've already—" she started. "You didn't even give me a chance to explain." "I've been a defense attorney for 38 years, I said. "I know what explanations sound like when someone's building a story instead of telling the truth. And I know how to build a case." She was crying again. Real tears this time. "My career," she said. "Everything I built." "You built it on lies," I said. "It was never real." I walked to the door. Then I stopped and turned back. "Margaret, my wife," I said. "She died in the bedroom upstairs. It was peaceful. She was at home, in the place she loved most. I held her hand while she went. And you turned that room into the background for your content without ever knowing what it meant." Vanessa didn't say anything. "I'll give you 1 hour to leave," I said. "After that, I'm calling the police and reporting trespassing." I walked out to my truck and sat there, watching the cabin. 43 minutes later, she came out. She'd called an Uber. She didn't look at me as she waited by the road. I drove home to Westchester. That evening, Eric called me. His voice was shaking. "Vanessa just told me everything," he said. She's been—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I know," I said gently. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." There was a long silence. "Did you know?" he asked. "Before today?" "I suspected," I said. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. Another silence. "Why?" he said finally. "Why would she do this?" "I don't know, son," I told him. "Some people lie because they're afraid. Some lie because they want something. And some people lie because they've convinced themselves that their version of the truth is the only one that matters." "What do I do now?" he asked. "You take care of yourself," I said. "You find a good lawyer. You rebuild, and you remember that this isn't your fault. He was quiet for a moment. Thank you, he said. He paused. For protecting me. We talked for another hour. I listened while he processed. Anger, hurt, confusion, relief that it was over, shame that he hadn't seen it sooner. All of it was normal. All of it was necessary. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time. David Brennan called the next day. 3 of Vanessa's major sponsors had terminated their contracts. The platform had demonetized her accounts, pending an investigation into fraud allegations. Blake Morrison had filed a complaint with the police about the money she'd taken from him. She'd posted one final video. In it, she was crying, talking about being the victim of a coordinated attack by her ex-husband's family. She claimed they'd never accepted her, that they'd manufactured evidence because they wanted to control her life. She called me vindictive and cruel. The comment section told a different story. Her followers had found the security footage, which had been submitted to the platform as part of the investigation. They'd found the screenshots showing her location fraud. They'd connected the dots. The comment section was brutal. Thousands of people feeling betrayed by someone they'd trusted, accusing her of scamming them, lying to them, using them for money and attention. Within a week, she'd lost 300,000 followers. Her accounts were permanently removed from the platform for violations of their authenticity guidelines. Her sponsors released statements distancing themselves from her brand. Blake Morrison's complaint had led to a fraud investigation. Eric filed for divorce. The proceedings were quiet, handled by David's firm. Because of the documented adultery and financial deception, the settlement was heavily in Eric's favor. Vanessa received nothing from the marriage except her personal belongings. 2 months later, I drove up to the cabin with Eric. It was late afternoon, the sun filtering through the pine trees the way it used to when he was a boy. We spent the evening fishing on the lake, not catching much, not talking about anything important, just being in the space together. Before we left, Eric walked through the cabin one more time. Thank you for protecting this place, he said. For protecting Mom's memory. I nodded. That's what family does, I told him. On the drive home, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I loved her. I really did. I thought she was the one. I know, I said. How do you trust anyone after something like this? He asked. You don't stop trusting, I told him. You just learn to watch more carefully, to trust your instincts, to value honesty over performance. He thought about that. Did you know right away? He asked. That she wasn't right for me? I suspected, I admitted. But you needed to make your own choices. My job wasn't to control your life. It was to be there when you needed me. We drove in silence for a while. The lesson I learned, over 38 years of practicing law, is this. The truth always has weight to it. It's solid, consistent. When someone's lying, their story shifts. Details change. There are gaps where logic should be. People who tell the truth can answer questions without thinking. People who lie need time to remember which version they told you. Vanessa's entire life was performance. Every word calculated for effect. Every action designed for an audience. She'd lost track of what was real because nothing about her was real. Eric would heal. He was young. He'd be more careful next time, more aware, and he'd be okay. As for me, I was at peace with what I'd done. Some people might say I was too harsh, that I should have given her a chance to explain, that I destroyed her career and her life. But I'd watched her lie to my grandson every day for 2 years. I'd seen her monetize my wife's memory without permission. I'd documented her fraud against her sponsors and her followers, and Blake Morrison. I'd built a case the way I'd built hundreds of cases over my career. Carefully, methodically, with evidence that couldn't be disputed. When you practice law long enough, you learn that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just one phone call to the right person at the right time. Sometimes it's documentation and evidence and strategic timing. Sometimes it's knowing when to act and when to wait. Margaret used to say that the best revenge is living well, but sometimes the best protection is making sure the person who hurt your family can't hurt anyone else the same way. 3 months after everything happened, I got a message on LinkedIn from a woman named Sarah. She said she'd been following the situation with Vanessa's accounts. She thanked me for exposing the fraud. She said she'd been scammed by a different influencer in a similar way, lost thousands of dollars, never thought anyone would care or do anything about it. She said seeing Vanessa face consequences gave her hope that maybe the system could work, that maybe someone would protect people from being exploited. I didn't respond. I didn't need thanks. But I saved that message. Because that's what it was really about. Not revenge, not punishment, protection. Making sure that the next Blake Morrison, the next trusting follower, the next young man like Eric wouldn't be the next victim. I still go up to the cabin regularly. Sometimes Eric comes with me. We've started making repairs, updating things, putting our own mark on the place while respecting what it was. Last week, we planted a new oak tree by the lake. Margaret always wanted one there. Said it would provide shade for future generations. Eric and I stood there after we'd finished, looking at this small tree that would one day be massive. She'd be proud of you, he said quietly, for how you handled everything. I hope so, I said. We stood there as the sun set over the water, and I thought about Margaret's voice in my head, the way I still hear it sometimes when I need guidance. She would have said, I did the right thing, not the easy thing, not the gentle thing, but the right thing. And that's all any of us can do. Protect the people we love. Stand up for the truth, and let the consequences fall where they may. The oak tree will grow, Eric will heal, the cabin will stand. And somewhere out there, maybe someone else will think twice before they decide to build their life on lies. That's enough for me.